Let's just get straight into it, guys. Let me see if I can put it here, like magically. That's the master chain. There it is. All right, that's it. That's the master chain. That's the chain. There you go, you're done. Have fun. Go make some music. That's it. That's how he gets his mixes sounding like that, you know? It's just that. It's all it is. No skill, no hard work. It's just this master chain right here. So, I mean, that is it, more or less. I mean, let's just say generally speaking, because there's a little more to it. But the overall take from this video, honestly, is just like, whatever those extra bits are we don't know about, they don't matter. Because this thing doesn't matter either. None of it matters. It doesn't matter, guys. Like I said, you can just end the video here. It's just, there's just no tool. There's just no magic tool to it, you know? There's no magic to it. I know a few other guys who are like equally obsessed as I am with just mixing and sort of trying to figure out what Serban in particular is doing. So we've kind of had our pet theories about what is the chain, like the real true chain. I'm just gonna outline all the basics of it here and everything that I know that is publicly available. Again, I'm not gonna be able to cover all of it. This video, even though it's just kind of like an overview, it's pretty detailed. I mean, I'm not skipping anything here, but it is a topic that I could just talk about for hours and hours and hours. Now, I'm by no means the first person to address this stuff, by the way. This information's been publicly available for a while now. Discussions around the master bus in general are just like never ending, I feel like. Master buses are just for some reason like, I don't know, kind of fascinating. Everybody wants to know, what do you got on your channel, bro? Like, what's on your master bus, bro? You know what I mean? I don't know. There's like this allure to it. Like, oh, that so-and-so has that sound and it's gotta be something on the master, you know what I mean? And hey, there's cool stuff you can do there. But people just put like way too much power on it. They put the master bus on a pedestal, you know? It's even called the master bus, you know? It's the master of all buses. But yeah, don't put the bus on the pedestal, guys. Just don't do it. By the way, I finally figured out how to say his name. Here's a clip of his son, Alex, saying it.
My name is Alex Ghenea.
Ghenea. There you go. I used to think it was Ghenea, like this guy.
Serban Ghenea is one of the biggest mixers of all time.
I'm really glad I didn't say it like this. Serban Ghenea. I don't know how he came to that conclusion. The truth is finally out. Who cares about the master channel? Now we know all how to say his name. So there have been a decent amount of YouTube videos on Serban, and a few specifically on the master chain itself. Some of those are, I'd say, pretty accurate, semi-accurate. I mean, we're all basically just guessing here anyway, so, you know. By the way, take all of this with a grain of salt too. But I just wanted to offload my own thoughts on this subject, as it's sort of been this like fun side quest for me and a few other producers and mixing engineer friends of mine who I know, who are all just interested in this kind of jazz or whatever. Also, and this is actually kind of important, so the benefit of me waiting all this time, I guess, to make this type of video is that I have 4 or 5-ish years of real life experience kind of just using these types of methods. I'm not a total set and forget type of person, but the sort of ethos has existed. And I've tried the specific one that I think is his chain in real life for a while. I'll show you a few examples of this master chain in real life usage as well, so just feel free to use the chapters or whatever if you want to skip around to that. Once I kind of figured out what I thought was like the sort of chain, I just kind of tweaked it, kept tweaking it, as you should, right? You know, what is that saying? Good artist copy, great artist steal. But I think, you know, the part that's left out of that is when you steal, and then crucially, you make it your own. I think at least. I think that's kind of implied, but it's not said. And it's kind of crucial. Like when you go and you steal somebody's concept or thing or whatever it is, you're doing it because you're going, hey, that's cool. It's this meme here, you know? It's like, hey, that's mine now. But when you do that, the crucial thing is to make it yours. And then the heck, there's a weird bird in the bushes. But yeah, and then tweaking it, making it my own. Do that. You should do that too. Don't just steal for the sake of stealing, you know what I mean? So I planned on making this video actually like a few years ago, and then for whatever reason, I just never did. And then, so here we are. Here's a clip of me in 2024 talking about this stuff. And I had this sort of like kind of aha moment. Here I am again. Years later. Like I said, this topic has taken up a lot of my brain space, so to speak. But it's never really been specifically about Serban's master channel, but just the topic of master channels, master buses, and bus-specific tools in general. For example, back in the day, I'd say like 2010, 2012-ish, a few friends of mine were passing around this master chain called Final Mastering Chain 1. It was at the time like pretty goated, to us at least. It just basically squashed the living crap out of the tune. It just made your tracks sort of impressive sounding really quickly. But at the end of the day, it was honestly just like this. If you mixed into it and then you took it off later, your mix would sound like Homer's back here. The main component was this linear phase multiband from Waves that was doing that sort of squashing work, just slamming the crap out of it while leaving the low end kind of clean. You could obviously tweak it to make it way less squash sounding, but honestly, it was just kind of fun to throw around a bunch of different mixes and see what it did. I actually went back and asked some friends of mine and confirmed that it was from this guy, Corey Enemy. So shout out to Corey. It just kind of ended up on a bunch of sessions because of just being around. Also, I don't know, I'm just speaking for myself, not really knowing what I was doing half the time. I was just kind of randomly doing things that sounded good or didn't sound good. Anyways, this was during like a really fun time in like the whole whatever EDM dance music underground scene back then, where people were just experimenting a lot, and like YouTube hadn't really exploded yet then completely in terms of at least like being a source for literally anything. I have a lot of good fond memories from that time actually, because you know, just getting into the weeds of it all, and like I don't know, just learning and being pushed in a good way by friends and other people in the scene, I guess. Check it out. I still have it actually. This is kind of like what it sounds like if you just put it on a bunch of random stuff. Needless to say, I mean, I guess like there's always, I don't know, not for everybody, but at least for me, there's always been this like lore around master chains and like the perfect chain or whatever. And what better source of lore for a master chain than the one from the most successful mixing engineer of all time? And I mean also the one who's been the pioneer of in-the-box mixing, thus lending even more lore to the pile. Because of obviously the whole, how does he achieve that sound inside the box? That whole aspect. If you don't know who Serban is and you're a producer, engineer, songwriter, and want to be better at mixing, I mean, you should know who he is. Now, on the other hand, if you're a mixing or mastering engineer and you don't know who Serban is, well, I mean, okay. Yeah, wow. I don't know what to tell you, man. That's like being obsessed with basketball and not knowing who LeBron or Michael Jordan is. I mean, I guess it's possible somebody doesn't know about him, but yeah. I'm not gonna give you like a whole history lesson on who he is. There's other videos that have done that already, but I mean... Just something about you.
I like the way you work it. You make me come in. I feel it. Cause the players gonna play like this, the Tiffany's and
When I was first making this video and looking into his stats, that was actually around 2024. At that time, Serban had mixed 231 #1 singles, and he had about 21 Grammys. As of January 2026, 240 and 25. So, yeah. He's doing this thing, you know? He's pumping him out. That's a lot. Oh, yeah. Guys, he's a big deal. Here's a fun factoid for you. Serban actually mixed my band's almost entire album back in the day in 2007-ish. Holy crap, that's 20 years ago. Oh, my God. And don't quote me on this, but if I remember correct, it cost, I think, $10,000 for him to mix the entire record. Also, do not quote me on this, but I think for a while now, he's been about 10K per track, maybe per single. I'm sure that fluctuates, maybe based off like if he does an entire full record or something, or I don't know, project to project or something, but I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting and hilarious to think about. But yeah, back when he mixed my band's record, I mean, he was still relatively unknown. It wasn't long after that he just kind of stratospherically took off. So I got to experience Serban's power very early on in my career. Yeah, this was the first time I felt like true power of mixing. Honestly, like I was like really, my mind was blown. As a firework goes off. That was perfect timing, oh my god. Behind me. Whoa, there's some traffic here. Honestly felt like magic to me at the time. Like I was still pretty young and working by myself in like my old KRKs in like a bedroom. I just didn't really understand what even mixing was. So when I heard the end result of what he actually did, I just didn't know you could do stuff like that. He honestly made choices that I thought were impossible to do, like after the fact. It felt like sound design to my untrained ears. I didn't know that term back then, but honestly, that's kind of what it was. Like if I could have described it somehow, I'd have been like, he's changing the sound. He's like sculpting stuff. Like, I mean, like shaping the attack of guitar tones to the point that I just didn't think was possible. This attack on this song, maybe I'll just put like a little clip of it here.
Everything you thought you wanted, everything you thought you need, everything you thought you wanted, everything you thought you need.
It was like mind-blowing. It's that saying like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. It felt like he had some tech, some alien tech. He was able to like make the guitar transients just like poke through like crazy. And he was actually making creative decisions that really impacted the way that the song felt. Like there's this one part in this song where I had played this like synth pad, and in the demo, like the pad was so low and tucked that it almost felt like a cut, and like all he did was really just raised it up so that it really clearly went through the end of the chorus into the verse, and it really made that part for me. And for me, I was like, oh my god, that's perfect. It's so silly now, but it really did open up this whole other realm of like music to me. The fascination with Serban's process and the lore built up around him boils down to basically just a few major factors, I'd say. Number one, since pretty much the beginning of his like recognized mixing career, he's been in the box.
What's in the box?
Which means he doesn't use any analog gear at all. Just the software, you know, with the tiny caveats, which I'll mention later. Number two, he's notorious for not doing really any interviews. And the info that used to be out there on him was very sparse. And it still kind of is, to be honest, because he doesn't really give any interviews himself. There's this 2 Zoom videos that you can find from the Recording Academy. I actually downloaded them. They kind of disappeared. I can't actually find the links. So if somebody wants to do that, feel free.
Now you've got unlimited amounts of everything, and just people go apeshit with the stuff.
I don't know if I can share those. Maybe I can. I don't know. If I can, I'll upload them. Maybe I'll look into it. I'm sure they're somewhere. But anyway, not a lot of interviews. Number 3, I mean, he's arguably the most in-demand, well-known, and I think pretty objectively the best pop mixing engineer in the world. I'd say ever. I know this is a bold claim, but I don't think it's very subjective. If you took a poll of all the mixing engineers on the planet and asked them who's the most influential, just most epic, just overall best pop mixing engineer in the world, I think everybody would say Serban. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, recently, however, well, not recently anymore. It's been like 7 years now. It's kind of crazy. The floodgates opened into the Serban information space, or yeah, whatever, on Gearspace. Sorry. He's been spilling the beans, man. He's been spilling the beans. So a whole 2 years after this specific thread was started by, let's see, Eric123. John hops on at page 59, if you're curious. His handle is The Haynes. John's been Serban's mix assistant since like basically pretty much the beginning. They started Mixstar Studios together back in 2001. That's the name of the studio that they work out of. John isn't there anymore. There's a new mix assistant, by the way. I forget his name. John's been basically spilling the beans over there and giving lots of just incredible info on Serban's process and techniques. John's also a really good mixing engineer himself and just like a really cool dude. It's pretty safe to say that I'm not the only one whose mind was kind of blown when we just found out that John's been, you know, spilling the beans over there. And the post is still very active, and John keeps sharing stuff over there all the time. Huge shout out to John for being such a G. So, funny thing on this topic, so I did like a web crawl thingy on the Gearspace thread a few years ago, and I just basically isolated every question and answer that John replied to and turned that into a CSV file. I think nowadays with the LLMs having progressed, it's way more useful to navigate that CSV file now. I did throw it into Gemini's Notebook LM, and it's been really good, actually, just like asking it questions, and like it helps you just sort through that CSV file. And it's like nice. I used it to make this video. I've been making notes for myself like a lot of other people have, and it's just like a nice way to like just kind of like you could just talk to it. So I actually just decided to make a Patreon account so that I could share the CSV file. Anyway, check it out. I'll put the link in the description if you want that. And if you do end up messing around with it and like organizing it or formatting it, and better yet, if you add stuff to it, like, because I stopped at page on the thread, and so if somebody, you know, would be kind enough to, who's maybe better at like this whole web crawl stuff anyway, maybe they could just update it or like make a new one or something, and then if you do, you can share it with me or everybody. That would be cool. I'd love to check that out. I really do recommend you download this CSV file and then go and actually check out the Gearspace forum. My mic is falling. One more thing before we talk about the chain. If you're curious on whether or not you should or shouldn't listen to me specifically about this subject, which is an entirely valid question, feel free to check out the link I put down into the description where it's got like my mixes that I've done and just my, if you're curious, my production stuff. But specifically, I mean, I guess the mixing stuff, because that's what this is about. And you can kind of judge for yourself. And I'm not saying that because I think I'm like good or something. Everyone has stylistic differences and just approaches to how they mix and work and how they think about mixing. And I think hearing what kind of work somebody else has done can really inform the way you listen to someone's opinion. Like if you exclusively mix metal, I'm probably going to listen to your take on pop mixes a little differently, just like with a slightly different lens at least, just naturally because of that. Again, Serban is a pop mixing engineer. He's not known for doing metal. I don't know. I'm sure he could probably do it. I actually saw John talk about like different genres at some point, and they might not really even like, I don't know, I can't remember what he said, but something like if somebody sent him like a metal mix, they might like turn it down or something. Don't quote me on, but I mean, they know their lane. I just wanted to be transparent about my own abilities here. Like, because there's no sort of scientific consensus in the arts in terms of, you know, you went to Harvard and so you're automatically a trusted source now. That doesn't really exist in the arts. So it's kind of difficult because we all have to just use our own subjective ears. So I implore you to do the same here. Just, you know, go and actually listen, use your own ears. Stop this video here, you know, if you think I'm complete garbage, you know what I mean? Please don't waste your time. I think that's a good idea. Don't take my word on everything, but I'm basing everything here on my experience, but then also just like the actual factual statements coming from John. And then, like I said, my now like 5-ish years of working with these methods and like actually using them in real sessions, in songs that have come out, in like me thinking about this stuff for a long time. And also like just getting other producers' opinions, other mixing engineers' opinions. So yeah, anyway, this is coming from not just a random place. Like I really truly feel like that offloading thing that I said earlier is why I'm making this video, because like I said, I tried to do this a couple of years ago and now I'm like, oh, I just gotta do it. Also, I mean, music production is just like my livelihood. It's actually insanely hard for me to take the time off and make these kind of videos. So, okay, finally get to the chain itself. Here we go. All right, let's start here. All right, so here you can see, John says that they use generally 4 to 5 different plugins on the master chain. So I'm basing all of this, first of all, off of that in terms of the number of plugins, but not exclusively, obviously. There's a lot of info here, guys. So the order of operation goes like this. So number 1 in the chain, we have a broadband compressor. The potentials there are 33609, the SSLG bus, all kinds of things. And there's a rumor about potential for even like some sort of boomer plugin like RComp or something, you know what I mean? Boomer plugin. This one is doing like around, generally speaking, 1 to 3 decibels of gain reduction. For 2, we have MixHead, aka Machine Head. And there's actually 2 choices now. The other one being Machine Head from SPL. Number 3, we have, I don't know, I'll just call it X. Kind of like this is like the slot machine part of the equation. Like this can change. And I think this is why he says it's like 4 to 5. Because this one, there's room for a few things like OTT, an EQ, whatever the mix calls for. Think about it as a slot machine. More on that later. In slot number 4, we have ML4000. And this is also a compressor. It's a multi-band compressor though. And last but not least, slot number 5 is just the final limiter. Again, that's doing like 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction, depending on the loudness of the mix. We'll cover all this in more detail later. And that might just be like whatever, an ozone limiter or something. It doesn't really matter. I mean, and that's it. Like I said, we're going to look at each component in more detail, and I'll show you some examples of a mix that I did where I'm actually going to replace my master chain with this one and just kind of show you how I would kind of work with it. But first, let's just keep this whole bird's eye view perspective for a little bit longer. What's the main takeaway for me here? I mean, this is the thing. Like, this is, if you get anything out of this video, it's this. It's not magic. the master channel is not magical. This chain is honestly like very basic. Literally very, very similar to the kinds of chains that me and a ton of other people have been using for ever. It's literally super similar to chains that I've used throughout my life. This is the newsflash. Serban is actually just really good at mixing. Newsflash. I mean, he could easily mix without this chain and it would sound exactly the same, more or less. Or he could replace it with an entirely different one. And it would, this isn't gonna make him sound like him, you know what I mean? So don't think that like if you go out and buy every plugin here and then like recreate this exact chain, you're gonna just like magically sound like the best mixing engineer in the world or whatever. Like it doesn't work like that. It's essentially 4 plugins, plus maybe 1, plus maybe 2, depending on the thing. I'm just gonna like run through a few notes on what John said about the chain, like just some general guidelines. It's just good to get this out there. I could just like make a screenshot of this and like you could just read it yourself, but like I don't know, maybe somebody's listening to this in like a podcast style, so I'll just read this out. We have one standard mix bus chain that is used on everything. We mix through it, meaning it goes on at the beginning of the mixing process and the whole process of mixing is done with it in place. It is mostly set and forget, but there are times when small adjustments might be made to overall EQ, compression, limiting, etc. When we get sessions from producers that have their own mix bus chains in place, we'll review what they are doing with each plugin. Some things we will keep in place because it has become an integral part of their rough mix. Other things can be removed or replaced by our own tool. Quite often, just removing some things from the rough mix chain will make the mix better right away. A lot of producers just like go way overboard with the master chains. Like I said, that's why I mentioned that final mastering chain, because I used to do that. A lot of people do that. I won't share exactly what we use here, as that chain was developed and perfected by Serban and is his proprietary. More thoughts on this later. We generally leave little for mastering engineers to do. It takes great skill to take it to that sounds like it's already mastered place. So definitely a pro move there. Here's an example that he shared on Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero. And you can see the pre-master and the post-master are like identical. So yeah, pro move. Makes you question about mastering. Nah, I'm just kidding. I mean, look, a whole nother discussion that. Okay, continuing. So on a typical loud mix, at the loudest part of the song, on my DK audio meter set to MBC scale, which is at AES full scale, will be sitting around -6 with peaks to -4. The theory here is do everything that will affect the sound inside the mix, which the artist, producer, and mixer have tweaked to perfection. None of this stuff was highly surprising to me, honestly, but the one thing that I was really curious about was the gain staging. And he did get into all that stuff, which I was stoked on, so here are my notes on that. There's a lot. No trim plugin to control input level into master bus. Consistency comes from experience and listening to the volume, looking at the meters, and knowing about what levels I should be at to hit the master bus, about where I want consistently. If things start to get too hot, I'd rather make a group of everything that is feeding the master bus and trim all of the tracks down equally rather than using a plugin on the master to do it. Always trying to maintain proper gain structure and not just compensate for bad gain structure at the end of the chain. -6 LUFS after master channel is a mark for watch out, it's getting hot. Yes, I always mix into the master chain with limiting from the beginning of the mix. If you try to put something on at the end of the process, it will undo or change a bunch of the work that you already put in. Mix into the glue. In this way, you can also control the amount of limiting going on as you work. Mix getting too loud, pull everything down a bit. You can do this during the mix because you'll be able to adjust for how it changes things as you mix. If you do it at the end of the mix, it can change the sound of the mix. So individual tracks will get limiters as well as necessary, or the volume of parts within the tracks can be written down as a sort of manual limiting. I would say overall there's a lot more compression and volume rides being done than just hitting louder parts with a limiter. Generally speaking, gain reduction isn't going to be a ton. So he's speaking here about the gain reduction of the master channel itself in the various stages of it. For a standard mid-tempo, maybe 1.5 to 2 decibels on a compressor, and another 1 to 2 at the end of the chain in combined compression and limiting. So this isn't doing a lot. For a really aggressive song though, it could be 3 decibels on the compressor and 2 down the chain of compression and limiting. If I'm approaching 3 decibels at the end of the chain, I'd really start to looking at my gain structure. I'm paying attention to gain staging and gain structure through the whole mix. It isn't really something that easily fix at the end of the process. This gain structure, gain staging stuff is literally it. This is mixing. Like, you cannot just slap, like, even if you had his channel and you just slapped it on somebody's mix, it's not gonna sound good. Like, this is the thing. Like, you gotta know how to mix. This is why, like, I took a lot of notes on the gain staging, because that was interesting to me. I'm just curious, like, what their methods were. So, okay, into the detail of the plugins themselves. So there are many clues here about how each slot, let's just call them, functions in terms of serving the other slots. Again, gain staging. And this is kind of what I mean by that. I'll just detail the plugins themselves. So slot number 1, it's a broadband compressor. Broadband meaning that it affects the entire frequency spectrum. Any loud element in the mix that triggers the compressor will affect the compression on the entire frequency spectrum. So it's best to be careful and not too heavy-handed on this. I mean, I have my own thoughts on this, but again, this is where you tweak to your own liking. It seems like they don't really use like a sidechain filter on this first broadband compressor to clean that low end up. So sort of just to bypass that, like your kick, for example, so that that doesn't trigger the bus. They would rather fix issues in the mix, because like now the SSL G-Bus compressor, for example, has a sidechain, and like the FabFilter C2 has that. A lot of these modern compressors have that. I have a sneaky feeling that the compressor that they use there doesn't even have that. It's just my hot take. One speculation for a while was that they were using the 33609 because they actually did have that unit and apparently did get used at times maybe earlier on. It was the J series discrete hardware unit, but they phased it out, I think, at some point, pretty early on maybe, I guess. John actually recommended against because of problems with its relays. He talks about it in some detail. I personally highly doubt there's been like a 33609 emulation on their channel. I don't know. I just don't think that's the case. This is something I find interesting too. John says, quote, "We never really got in the box with SSL console compressor emulations." That kind of clears out the SSL G-Bus, which is like my favorite. I don't know. I still, even to this day, like even though I use like a version of their kind of setup sometimes, I still just like the G-Bus. I just use that on most things. There's a rumor floating around that it's actually a much more of a boomer style compressor, like RComp, for example. And, you know, just like that old school Waves L1 days of plugin. I've tried that many times, and it sounds great. Like, hey, you know, if it ain't broke, feel free to experiment. I honestly don't think this is the most consequential part of the chain in terms of like building the sound up, and that happens later. I think they're just being kind of careful with this. Its main purpose is to be quite light, again, depending on the song, and just to kind of catch peaks more broadly speaking before going into the next phase of the plugin, this next slot, which is number 2, MixHead, aka Machine Head by SPL. Well, actually, there's 2 choices now. So this is the caveat I talked about earlier. I'm losing track of the caveats. This thread was the first time that I believe this was the first time everybody found out about Machine Head. Metric Halo, or Make Believe Studios, I guess, they made the first emulation of this. So it's kind of ironic that SPL didn't actually make it. So they just had to make their version really quickly after this because they were like, oh my god, everybody's freaking out and buying. Why didn't we do it? This is because of Serban's lore. And we basically found out that this piece of hardware originally has been on Serban's master chain since the dawn of him mixing, basically, I guess. Pretty much for like 20 years or something. And John's argument why he considers this to still be in the box. By the way, now it fully is because of the software version of Machine Head and MixHead. You know, they are confirmed to be using this plugin version now because there's just like, it's just way easier. For John, there's Atmos reasons. You can actually do that now. But for 20 years, they were using the hardware unit. And here you can see John's explanation on why he considers this still to be count as being in the box, which I totally agree with, actually. So he says, it was a software program for spectral design audio. SPL built the hardware unit to run this software using Motorola 56002 DSP chips. If they could have shrunk it down to a new bus card, they probably would have. Then it would definitely be in the box. It is essentially a computer that does one thing and runs one piece of software. So to me, it is as in the box as running a UAD satellite and other more modern external processors. It was just way ahead of its time. It was a piece of software that ran on a piece of hardware. So it's kind of a tape emulation tool. I'm not going to dive into all the details of what Machine Head or MixHead is, but it makes sense to control the signal going into this. I mean, I've never used tape, but I have a feeling, I don't know, like I think that's how people were using tape back then. They were like kind of compressing before, so you kind of just catching those peaks. So you didn't get like loud pieces of stuff going into the tape. You know what I mean? I don't know. I could be totally wrong about that, but that's how they're using it. I mean, here you can see John talk about them using it that way. And here's some more, bits about it. He says, well, there it is, one part of the secret master chain. We've been using this all digital hardware unit for 20 plus years. Before there were any good plug-in tape emulations, we had the SPL machine head. The hardware units are virtually impossible to find. They are like gold. Apparently these sell for like $18,000. Like, oh, there's a question on advice on what kind of input levels you like to push into MixHead machine head. John says, depends on the songs, but we would kind of treat it like tape. Quiet song, not much going in. Loud song, you're looking for some tape compression effects. Generally not hitting higher than halfway up the input meter. But again, this was for the hardware unit that was basically set to one thing. Now we are experimenting and changing settings with the plugin. The cool thing about actually having MixHead, the plugin, the Metric Halo one, the Make Believe Studios one, is that there's the actual preset from Serban. And this is like a big sort of clue to the gain staging because it gives you that exact preset. So now you know, because of what he just said about hitting it at, generally speaking, like somewhere in the middle for like a loud mix. Now you know how loud you have to go into MixHead, which means you can balance your first compressor to a level that's always kind of feeding it at that appropriate setting. There's a limit too to naturally, like once you start pushing too far into MixHead, it'll start to kind of tear things apart a bit, kind of get too like sort of tape clipped soundy or whatever you want to call it. And that of course by nature also gives us a general feeling of how loud the mix will be going into the next phase, like sort of like a kind of a guideline. And this part is arguably the most sound inducing part of the whole thing. Oh, by the way, here's another fun one. You can automating tape speed, anybody? And number 3 is the ML4k. And technically here, we kind of are skipping this whole slot X here because, again, I don't know how consequential it really is. It's an immovable part, so we're just gonna ignore that for now. But like I said, it could be OTT, so more on that later. Late in the chain. That's why I'm putting it at number 3. Makes sense. Like I said, if there's one plugin in this chain that can impart a sound the most, it's this one. We don't know exactly what the preset is here, which is this is like the big one, like to me. Even if I did, I mean I wouldn't share it if I had some magical way of knowing, because well, John and Serban want to keep this their trade secret. I respect that. More on that later. I mean, there could be like an entire masterclass on the concept of multi-band compression, especially on a master channel. There's just so much to do. You could really destroy your mix here. You could really shape it. There's just a lot you can do. Basically, the entire signal on a ML4k, there's 4 bands, so it's split into 4 sections. The sort of lows, the low mids, the mids, and the highs, or however you want to think about it. So each area, you get your own compression, so you can compress the lows in a unique way compared to the highs versus the mids and all that. This is theoretically where you can really shape the sound more than a traditional broadband compressor like the one down the chain on number 1. And you can really get more of a character out of your mix, much more creatively than a broadband compressor or even an EQ, really. You can shape these bands, you can push them up and down, which is essentially an EQ, but then you can also compress. This essentially is an EQ, like a tone shaper of sorts. You also have expansion here, which they definitely use. John's on record saying they use expansion, but John also says that most of that sort of sound of expansion gets done inside the mix on the tracks themselves, which makes sense. So the expansion, if it happens, it's probably pretty light on the master channel. This isn't like OTT style heavy-handed, expansion. That would be dumb. Like that doesn't make any sense. I personally shy away from expansion on the master channel at all. Sometimes at the very end, I'll kind of try it out a touch, and it can be nice. But I mean, like I said, back in the day with the final limiting chain and like the OTT of it all, yeah, I just, kind of grew out of it. Guessing the limiter is maybe not used on the ML4000 here, and instead the volume coming out of it is just basically a slightly more compressed version of what comes out of MixHead, which then gives you a final dB level that then gets that final limiter applied to it. Here you can see John talking about how all the bands are pretty similar and not doing like a crazy amount of work, which makes sense. Another huge aspect of the ML4k is that it messes with your phases. And this was one of the most interesting parts to me, honestly, like hearing that this was on there. It revealed like kind of like a fun fact, which is they just don't really care about like the sort of micro detail stuff to the degree that you might think that they do. Like there's this just like assumption that because it's so good and clean and stuff, they gotta be like scientists, like just like micro-analyzing everything, which they do. But again, more on that later. Here, just check out what happens when you have a clean sine wave kick and you apply ML4000 to it. This kick right here is super clean. You can see it right here. When you turn on ML4000, this is what happens. So that's happening because of these crossover points. Even when you just put ML4000 on and you don't have it doing anything. So like, as you can see, the gate, expansion, compression, and limiting, it's all off. It's not doing anything actually. These crossover points are still enabled. So they're doing the work. If you want to know more about phase and the rotation of all this, you can watch our long video on phase rotation and how that kind of all works. And of course, when you add this to the master channel, it's going to be doing this to every single track. So technically it's not as bad as, let's say, if you just put it on the kick and you relied that the kick was very phase accurate with your bass. Like you spent a lot of time working and making sure that the kick and the bass were aligned properly. Well, now if you put this on the kick or the bass, it's gonna do this shifting, and now all that work that you did might be kind of out the window. But if you're putting this on the master channel, it's gonna do that to every single track. So it's not that big of a deal, honestly. And for Serban, it's clearly like not been an issue, right?
Oh man, it is kind of hot, but it's so nice. I mean, I can't complain about these LA summer days right now. They're perfect. Holy crap, let's keep going. We're talking about OTT now. I mean, if you don't know what OTT is by now, like, well, hey, good for you. I mean, honestly, like, let's keep it that way. Well, that's actually kind of cool. I mean, yeah, sick.
Good for you, honestly. But if you don't know, it's an Ableton multiband preset that became so popular that a bunch of companies made plugin versions out of it for people who don't have Ableton. Xverse version, the most famous probably, and John mentions that specifically. It's literally built into Serum. That's how goated it is.
During those heydays of the 2010-ish era EDM or whatever that I talked about earlier, OTT was all the rage, especially in like the whole Ableton dance music producer community. Because again, OTT is specifically an Ableton multiband preset over the top. Most of the time it like snuck its way into that final master chain that I talked about, but I mean usually at like 10% max or something. You could always tell that it was on tracks that people had because they would just crank it a little too much, and then at the ends of like sections, like the end of a chorus going into a verse where it got quieter, or at the end of the song, like where the reverbs and the delays just kind of rang out, they would kind of just get sucked up, and you'd go like all the noise and whatever jazz was in there would just go because of the expansion going into the compression. So it was always like a telltale sign that somebody was using OTT a little too much. I'm definitely part of that gang. I know I fell for that many times, just being lazy. Good times.
It was always like a sign of just like, oh, yep, OTT. I see what you're doing, man. But I mean, usually like everybody kind of knew like you can't go too crazy with it, like especially on the master. So usually would be like maxed out at like 5 to 10% or something like that. Good times. Anyways, John had a lot of thoughts on this.
It did come up a bunch, which leads me to think that it's probably on the master chain more times than it's not, especially like if it's a more modern sort of like maybe louder pop mix, I don't know.
Which to me is just like so funny because this, like I said, has lived on master channels for so long, and I just can't imagine. I don't know, I could be curious to know when it like first made its way to them. Probably like around the time when like Xverse came out, because like I said, they're using Pro Tools and they wouldn't have been able to use OTT on their master until somebody made it for Pro Tools. So yeah, they have the AAX version. John says that, mentions that. But yeah, like I said, like a lot of people who, you know, have been using OTT for, I don't know, since like forever ago on Ableton kind of just like grew out of it, I guess. Just like stopped being that big of a thing eventually. Don't get me wrong, I still use it all the time, but like you got to learn how to tame the beast, so to speak. It's just kind of too aggressive for most scenarios. Sometimes it's good to put it on for hype and then just like redo the thing better later. Actually, low key, I use Bloom from OX Sound instead of OTT a lot of the times now because it is linear phase and it just like kind of, you can get the same sort of effect, but better and cleaner and easier and faster. So yeah, but if I'm YOLO and I don't care, OTT is still goated. Don't get me wrong.
But again, like it's not like they're choosing to put it on there. They're assessing the situation based on how the session coming to them from the producers.
The reality is that it's still on a lot of people's master buses, and because it does affect the phase relationships so much, you know, even if you have it on 0, the phase issues, so to speak, are not going anywhere. So in that case, you might want to just leave it on just because of that, and not even because it's doing any compression or expansion. Here's some notes from him talking about how they use the AAX version of the Xfer one, which, like I said, isn't the original. He says Xfer's OTT is very popular these days. I also like the MacD's ML4000 and 8000, as well as Isotope's Ozone tools. So plenty of multiband stuff going on there. Speaking on OTT, it does some nice and mysterious stuff. Enough said. Just funny to me. Well, we definitely don't use it on everything. It does have its uses. The default setting is unusable to me. I'd not ever approach 30%. It can be subtle. The mix still needs to be good and stand by itself without OTT. Duh. For OTT coming with sessions, I try taking it on and off and see if it's doing good work or not. Sometimes it is useful and other times it can be removed. It takes careful listening and decision making to determine if it's good on a song or not. Again, this makes sense because, like I said, even if it's not doing any compression or expansion, it's still doing the phase stuff. So just literally like on 0%, if somebody left it on the channel and we're working with it, it's doing stuff.
This is an interesting one because it relates to the whole sort of rock and roll YOLO energy of like,
do whatever sounds good, bro. Do you align the crossovers on your master bus, i.e. you use OTT, which is 88 and 2500 if I'm not mistaken? Do you use the same crossovers on ML4000 at the end of the chain? Answer, no, I've never really thought about doing that, but my first impression on thinking of it now is that it would be better to not align them. Doing that might cause some unintended consequences at those points.
I mean, first of all, OTT only has 3 bands versus ML4k having 4, so you couldn't align those phases up anyway perfectly. But I probably agree. I haven't done the test, but I'm guessing it would probably do worse things if you lined up those phases with each other.
I have a friend, actually, shout out to Mayan.
Phase rotation.
He actually talked about like reversing the ML4000 phase relationship. I forget. I might have to include a little thing here if I can get a quote on him for that. But I mean, that would make more sense than actually stacking more on top of it. You know what I mean? Here's another similar question. Hi, John. When you use multiband compression on the mix bus, do you use linear phase or minimum phase crossovers? Or even the dynamic EQ, dynamic phase in Pro MB? I ask because I used minimum phase on the last track in Pro MB, and as it flips the phase for the band, it gives an interesting sound. But I think I will probably stick with linear phase. I think you used ML4000, which is minimum. Ozone Dynamic uses hybrid by default. Anyway, just interested in what you would choose. Answer, to be honest, I don't pay attention to that and could not tell you what phase type is used. Just make it sound good. I've used all of the above in different circumstances and never thought to myself, I wonder if this is linear phase or not. Is that laziness on my part? Is it technical ignorance? Or is it using my ears instead of using my eyes? Mostly, I choose tools that feel easy to use and get the job done. Here's another answer to almost an exact duplicate question, and he says, I'll have to approach this philosophically, and it is kind of hard to not come across a little maybe arrogant with the answer, so forgive me. I'm trying not to sound self-important. I like this. This is funny to me. But as a philosophy that I think probably works for most busy engineers, we're not thinking about things in that way, and we're not analyzing mixes the way that, quote, hungry engineers are. I love that. This is why I say it is a set and forget process. Find something that works and then don't spend your time worrying over phase issues and ideal sounds, because most of your time working will not be trying to figure out a technical phase issue on the master, but will be trying to figure out how to get the client's request for the mix sound like their reference, only better, but don't change anything. I don't have the time to dig into why they sound right or wrong. Because this phase stuff is happening on the master, it's being applied to everything. And because it's on from the start, like set and forget style, the mix isn't like drastically changed because of that, because you're working with it. It's applied immediately. So like if the kicks sound slightly different or something, it's probably gonna get adjusted enough so that it'll work regardless. Like I just could imagine like if there is some like slight deviation for some reason and it's really significant, or it just happens to be significant, that I mean they would just hear that and like know what to do about it.
Clearly this hasn't been an issue for him in his decades of work. So hey, go off on your phases, bro. To me, Serban is like this perfect blend between art and science, which is exactly my personal ethos on production and mixing in general. I honestly do feel like that's the best balance, but it's also the hardest, because you need to sort of operate these two different headspaces. You need to know when to turn on the art brain, when to switch that off, and to go full science brain. And there's a time for both. If you're the kind of producer who doesn't like to deal with the sciencey stuff, like you just all art and you just want to flow and go quickly, which is extremely valid and super important, and I try to force myself into that brain space all the time.
But it just means that most likely there's a high chance that your mixing engineer is now going to be the one to have to put on more of a sciencey brain. Like I've been in this position where I've gotten a mix and I've been like, this is really creative and cool and it's awesome, and it's always like I'm gonna have like a little bit of a heyday trying to figure out how to like get this loud and clean and all the stuff that they want it to be, because you can't do it in its current state. Let's just put it that way.
That's subjective, of course. Like, of course, there are mixing engineers too, probably, who are like full art and no science, but I would probably wager that that's more rare. And I just, find that to be the case most of the time.
Here's John actually hinting at this exact fact. Now, number 4, the final limiter. This is probably just like ozone limiter or something very basic, whatever. Honestly, this is not consequential either. In the beginning, John mentions that it was literally just an L1 or an L2 because that was all that they basically had back then. Those were like the goated limiters. And honestly, they're still good. He did mention a few other limiters like the Weiss limiter and using that sometimes, but it doesn't seem like it's on all the time. I think this is like functionally irrelevant, because if you just think about a limiter, it's not like it's making the sound. You know what I mean? Like that's why I said the ML4000 is way more consequential for that kind of stuff. But I mean, yeah, it's good to know what they're using, I guess. And their just overall philosophy on gain staging and all that kind of stuff matters way more. But it's like essentially could be almost an any limiter, because like I said, you've seen now John talk about, they're not doing a ton of limiting anyway either. Almost any limiter could work for like loud mixes. I mean, it might matter more.
Limiters and clippers get talked about a lot, but I mean, honestly, unless you're going for like moody good levels, none of this really matters that much. Check out Moody Good.
That's not what Serban's mixing.
I mean, we're not talking about positive lufts. Like seriously, people do positive lufts. If you're strictly a mastering engineer,
yeah, you should know what limiters and clippers do and, the finer details of that, because that's what I'm paying you for. Like, I don't care for my mixing engineer to necessarily know that, but if you're a mastering engineer, you better know that stuff. Like, I don't want my mastering engineer to be all art. Feel free to disagree with me on this, but I want my mastering engineer to know the science. I want them to not be making creative decisions. That could be a whole nother discussion, a whole nother video. There's caveats to that, kind of, but that's like my take pretty much 99% of the time.
For everybody else, there's like a billion tools that work, and most of the stock ones are already good. Like the Ableton limiter is great. Just use that.
So here's a little bit. This might actually mean that the ML4k limiter might be on, but who knows? That would mean they would have to turn that part off inside the ML4000 plugin itself. Thus, like sort of taking off the limiter would mean taking multiple things off that are all doing a little bit. But I don't know. I could be wrong here. I personally try the limiter inside the ML4000 sometimes just to see what it does and just kind of see whatever. But then again, I also use a clipper a lot of the times too, like if it's like a loud mix, so that would come in like right after maybe, or depending on what I'm doing. So yeah, not always necessary. Number 5, just some random extra things. Widening, for example.
There's a video I saw somewhere that somebody said that they would use widening on the master channel,
and I highly doubt that.
And I did find a section where John kind of talked about that. Only time I ever do that is on demos, like if I'm going fast and I just want to get like a wide result quickly, like I'll throw something on the master to do that, usually the ozone one. But I mean, if that track then goes forward and needs to be finalized, I would then do the widening on the tracks themselves later, more legit, in a more like clean sort of way, or maybe on a bus, but never on the master. Again, no rules, but that's my personal preference.
EQ, they do have EQ on the master sometimes, at times. But again, this isn't consequential to the sound of it. I don't think they're not really like putting it on and like having a set and forget like boost at 10K. Here's John talking about that. An extra tape thing. So I guess it's possible. I didn't even remember this, but I was going through my notes and noticed this. But like maybe for some more maybe rare situations, they might actually have like an extra tape type thing on there. I don't know. I could see for like some of those weirder, like more indie sounding, like what's her name? Sabrina Carpenter type mixes. Like I don't know, please, 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 or I don't know, something like more indie. I don't know. Maybe those aren't good examples, but you get my point. Experiment. I've certainly done that. Nothing proprietary in terms of custom plugins. That's pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to show you like how I would use this type of setup and how I've been using it. It's not going to be like an extensive example of that, but just to kind of let you see some of the basics on how I kind of sort of think about this. Because it's just easier to see some of this stuff visually. So here, let's check it out. All right, so here's the session. And as you can see, this was during my gray period, as I would call it, where literally everything was colored gray for some reason. I have no idea why I did this. So this video is already extremely long, so I'm going to keep this very short. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a longer version of this video where I go through everything in way more detail. I'm going to put that up on my Patreon. So if somebody's interested, go ahead and go watch it over there. And I'm also going to make another version of this where I basically go through the writing process and the production process and just kind of talk about all of that. And in that video, I'll talk about how Herb Alpert ended up on the song. So yeah, if you're interested in all that. Also, check out the song in general. The two goats, Herb Alpert and Devin Morrison, they both play solos on this tune. So check out those solos. They're tasty. I'm going to play you a quick little snippet of the original final master. All right, so that's the final master. So here's nothing on the master channel, just for you to hear what that sounds like. All right, you get the point. Much more dynamics. Those drums are really punchy. And this next one that I'm going to play is going to be with the sort of Serban master. Chris Geringer actually did the mastering. I think in the Patreon video, I'll show what my final master that I sent to Chris sounded like too, if you're interested in that. All right, here's the song with the sort of the Serbanized master bus. All right, and now I'm just gonna go back and forth between the final that was released and then this Serbanized one. If you look at metric AB, when it goes blue, it'll be this current session with the Serban master, and then this orange one is the final. All right, so starting off with the official release. So you can hear immediately there's this sort of like, the final has a little bit more width, and this is actually kind of interesting. And there's also a little bit of like low end that is different. And there's a couple things actually that I pulled into this sort of Serban session from the original master. So my original master actually was just this. There was a Pro Q3, the SSLG bus. This, unfortunately, is the Ozone 8, which I don't have access to for some reason. I have to reinstall it, I think. And then just L2. And there's a lot of gain. This is more than I usually do, but hey, it's there. But there was also one more thing in there, which was the UAD, what is it, the BAX EQ. And this was adding quite a bit of top end at the super, super high. It's like an insanely high area. It's almost like a mag EQ style top end boost. But this was noticeable to me. I added this like low end bump here, and that helped me get it even closer to the original. So I'll add that. And then also, I think what I had on the Ozone 8, I haven't been able to confirm this, but maybe I'll confirm this and I'll look at this in the Patreon video. I think I had some imaging on the master. Usually I add it on the buses. I might have left it on and then just like kept it for some reason. And so I kind of mimic that here. So I'll turn those on too. And now let's listen back between the final master and this new chain. Here's the Ozone setting that I think I did. Usually I do this thing. I'll pull down the lows to kind of make it more mono. I like adding more of this low mid area and then less of these top ones. Show you what that sounds like. So I'll go back and forth between this one and the final. So you can see those are closer now. It's actually kind of funny to me, like they're very similar. And like I said, there's one of the points here is that like this chain that Serban uses is very similar to chains that I've used and like the method of how I use them for a long time. And not just me, but other people. But one little thing that I'll mention before I cut this video part off is that in order to run into this chain, this is the whole important part about the gain staging stuff for me, was that I had to basically bump 5.6 dB going into this chain. And there's probably like arguments maybe to be made for why you wouldn't want to do it with just a straight up utility plugin on your master chain. I wouldn't do that myself, just because I like to know my overall levels a little better in the mix, and I like to just do all that stuff there. John talks about using VCA groups to do this. If he needs to push up into the master, he'll rather use VCA groups than just a straight up utility on the master to do that. But I don't know. I also did some volume automation, so writing into the master chain less or more. It's just like a typical thing that people do. So if you're using more like buses and just like one instance of a gain going into it, you're just kind of sacrificing the whole concept of gain staging a little bit, but it's, I think, more theoretical than anything else and conceptual kind of thing. But anyway, to each their own. Use your ears, guys. If I don't have this 5.6 boost, you can check out the difference going into it. So here it is nothing. Versus I could compensate for that too, like if I turn that off and then I pull this basically like up more, so it's kind of more level matched. Versus something like, oh snap. Anyway, you get the point. So these are kind of like the main culprits that you want to be looking at when you're using this type of setup. Is your first compressor, you want to kind of look at that and see how that's reacting. And then also, I mean, if you are using something like the RComp, make sure that you're not hitting, this guy right here isn't turning on, because that is actually limiting. Most people don't know. If you run into that, like I'll show you here, that's going to actually start to limit inside of RComp. Most people don't know that that's what that does, but be careful of that. But anyway, like you can see when you run into this, you start to see this drive level go up. And there it's kind of hitting like around 5-ish. So that's kind of like what John talked about in terms of how loud he'll go into it. Maybe like a little bit more. So if this is like a really loud track, it'll probably be maybe up to 6. But that's something to keep an eye out on. And then on the ML4000 land, I think my just kind of theory is to just kind of look at these thresholds not going too crazy. So making sure that those are kind of under control. You can see they're kind of bumping around a little bit, but nothing too crazy. I have to stop here because this is going to be way too long. I have 10 billion more things to talk about. Like I said, if you're interested, just watch the full video on my Patreon. Now, on this whole keeping secrets part, John says, can't go any further into master bus than I already have. Sorry, some mysteries need to be maintained in the world. And I don't want to go further into mixed bus settings. Gotta hold some cards close to the chest. And here's on coming up with the sound and not giving away things. John says, quote, now Serban and I have been working together for a very long time, so my approaches are going to be learned from experiences through working closely with him, and he really is the one who developed the sound and the approach that we both use. I don't endorse any plugin especially, and I believe that you learn best by examining for yourself what different plugs and settings do and what works for yourself. Give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. I didn't develop it myself. It is not mine to give away. It is nice to have some secrets and an air of mystery. And I mean, I definitely agree on the whole fishing analogy. I do have a few thoughts on the whole keeping secrets thing. First, as you can tell, I love the lore, so I'm super down to keep the lore. Secondly, and like I've mentioned now before, this chain, and whatever the final version of it, isn't the thing that's going to be giving Serban an edge or whatever, in terms of sound specifically. There's an edge to it, but it's not about the sound. Now, I have heard some rumors from a few sources, let's say, that they actually and fully for a fact know what the master chain is. The full one. And the stuff that's not known, the non-disclosed parts, aren't making any meaningful differences. take that as however you want. I mean, yeah, but I tend to believe that.
I don't know if there's a snitch in the crew, but this whole thing is just so funny to me. Like, who cares? Like, honestly, it's so silly to me. But hey, whatever. It's the lore, right?
I think John talked about this in length at some point on the thread, actually. The main edge of having a chain like this is basically workflow and speed of mixes. It's also just like not uncommon to be working on an SSL and having a bus compressor on, for example, while you're working. People have been mixing into the glue since the beginning of time.
This is just adapting to that same workflow, just in the digital era, which we've been in for decades now. Serban's pumping out mixes like it's his job, you know? Like,
which it is, so... yeah, but I mean, he's bumping them out. I named the stats earlier. I mean, there's probably like a new #1 single coming out from the shed like every week, you know what I mean?
And I mean, if you want to do that, you want to have some, whatever, nice sauce or something, like, as the kids like to say. You know, you want to mix into that sauce. I hate that word. Ugh. Whenever anybody says sauce, like in production and mixing and music, I just, ugh. It's like the word moist to me. Like, don't do it, guys. Just stop using the word sauce. Or being in the lab, ugh. Ugh. What am I missing? There's a bunch of them. Anyway, the mix bus is a part of the sort of broad scopes template. I mean, people use templates for the same reason. It's part of your sonic identity, let's just say.
This is something that they've thought about a long time and it's become like a part of the thing. Again, also, it's an actual kind of metering tool. It gives you an idea on when you're too loud or when you're not loud enough. For example, I mean, like he said, there's times when you want to push into the master harder or softer, even within section. It's very much not uncommon to ride sort of levels into the master harder for like the hook section, because that's a different thing than just turning up your master after the fact. There's an entirely different feeling of pushing into glue rather than just going up in volume. So like if you've ever used the God particle, those like ranges that you want to hit are kind of like this concept. If you hit those ranges, you'll impart a sound that starts to kind of be in the same ballpark as what Jason Joshua likes to hit, for example.
I haven't been following that plugin too much, but I think that's kind of actually the concept. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think they've gotten other mixing engineers involved to have their own ranges and stuff. I mean, so this is a similar concept that Serban's been doing for decades, I think. And I'm sure other mix engineers. I don't think he's alone in this.
When Serban's mixing into the master, he's monitoring kind of those levels throughout the chain, like John talked about, and just like looking at how the needles are moving from one stage to the next stage. I don't know, like he's probably not like obsessively looking at that, and it's not like the end all be all. Like the whole set and forget thing is malleable to a point. Like they're clearly not completely set and forget. So it's kind of, that concept is used as like a broadly defined term, but it's just like kind of like a point of reference in some ways, just to make sure you're operating in the right ballpark. Another part of that, this is kind of funny, is the fact that you can pretty much guarantee that Alex Ghenea, Serban's son, has his dad's master chain. I mean, I just don't believe that he doesn't have it. But he doesn't sound like Serban. His mixes don't sound like him, I don't think. I mean, yeah, there's probably some mixes that sound closer, but I don't think he sounds like him. So the master chain's not doing that. Plus, he's a great mixing engineer. He wants to have his own sound too, right? Like you don't want to sound like somebody else. The point is to learn and take in what you like and then adapt that to your workflow, right? But on this point, it's just like funny to me.
I think it's hilarious to imagine the Ghenea master chain as a family heirloom that just gets passed down generation to generation as a sort of rite of passage or something, you know? Like you get it when you turn 16 and can drive a stick, you know? Like, here you go. You've earned it, son. You done it. You done learned to stick. You good to go. Here you go. Here's your master channel. You're welcome, son. I don't know. I don't think Serban has a southern accent, but also like to imagine that he does. Oh, God. What's wrong with me?
So the lore continues. I keep saying this, but the reality is it's not about the chain. It's about the production and like the pre-mix and then
drum roll. The actual mix.
The knob turning.
The EQ tweaks.
The automation.
The ears.
It's a mix by 1,000 cuts. Moves? Like mixed by 1,000 moves?
Let's just call it the mix by 1,000 cuts.
I don't know. Mixed by 1,000 edits. It's not a mix by 1,000 plugins either.
You get the point.
Serban's career is not gonna get dented if he released like the full chain. That's just a fact. I mean, can you imagine like the day that Serban decides to do a mix with the masters. Like, oh my God, that's gonna be great. That'll be literally like equivalent to the day when and if, what's his face, Skrillex drops the sample pack.
It'll happen, probably. And we'll all be here for it.
Yeah, talk about breaking the internet. Like, mix with the masters is like just drooling. You know how many times they probably hit him up? I wanna know. I wanna know how those emails look. Hey, Mr. Ghenea, are you ready yet? It's just insane to me. Oh God. Everybody will watch that. My mom will probably watch that. I'll probably make my mom watch that video.
Oh, it's getting hot out here. I gotta wrap this up.
All right, final thoughts. There's probably like a million billion things to still talk about. Now that I have this Patreon, maybe I'll start to like offload some of these types of ideas there that are just like more micro level discussions. I don't know. I'm open to thoughts and opinions on this. Please help me. Oh, one aspect that I'll mention here that is a big part of the equation is what John mentions as well. And it's pretty obvious if you think about it. It's the fact that the quality of the work that Serban receives in terms of the multi-tracks is already 99% of the time like insanely good. It's literally like the creme de la creme. I mean, I have some pre-mixed multi-tracks that were sent to Serban, things that Serban has mixed. A lot of those already, I mean, actually all the ones that I have sound really good already, but to like varying degrees, of course. Like, yeah, Max's mixes are gonna be pretty good going in.
You don't have to do a lot to get those mixes to sound better and good, and just to kind of do certain things that are obvious, kind of, I guess. And of course, like doing that, it's a helpful process to do to kind of try to get it to sound like the mix that Serban did, because you can learn a lot from that. But then also just to do your own thing, like, and just to see what you would do. It's very good exercise. You can do this stuff with production too, just imitating beats, trying to make a beat that sounds exactly like another person's. It's very useful.
Actually, really, so I like this point about just like when it's already really good, just like to kind of turn the mix on and just kind of chilling with it, not thinking too overly analytically about it, just like kind of like casually listening to it instead of like hyper analyzing it, I guess, and like looking at meters and graphs and all that sort of stuff.
Again, more art and less science can sometimes be better, even at a sort of hypercritical level.
Who would have thunk? Like, it's almost counterintuitive, but it's not when you think about it.
You know, there's times when he's tweaking mixes 5%, and then there's times when he's tweaking them like, I don't know, 30%, 40%, 50%, I don't know. It's not honestly super difficult to get some of those mixes to sound awesome from where they were. But I mean,
again, more art, less science can be good sometimes, can sometimes even be better, even at like a hypercritical level.
There's actually a YouTube video of this guy showing like the pre-mixed multi-tracks of Since You've Been Gone. If you want to check that out, I'll put the link in the description. That one seems more like a 30%er or something. I didn't go through the whole video, I just kind of skimmed around it, but yeah, it feels like it was a little bit more transformative. The mixes he did for my band definitely felt like they were 30-40%ers. Like, he was doing a lot.
It's hard to put a number on that, really, honestly, but like, they're more transformative. There are different types of mixers. There's like basically two categories, I guess, and like a hybrid in the middle, but like there's transformative mixers and then there's like purist mixers. Serban is probably kind of like a hybrid. You got other people who are way more transformative, and then you got like more old school type mixing engineers who are like way more purist, where they're not really transforming the mix like in a huge way. They're more like just retaining what's there and just making it better, if you know what I mean. But like I said, the mixes he did for my band, some of them were quite transformative. Yeah, I would say. Very big difference.
Oftentimes that last 5-10% can be also kind of difficult or more elusive.
It can really be where like, you know, the men get separated from the boys type of thing.
And this is where like good monitoring and a great room come in handy, because oftentimes producers might not have the best rooms available to them. So you need to have an environment that you fully trust, where if you're getting handed files that are already like super close, then you know, you should be able to hear detail work, and at that point, like it's not like you're mastering, but it's getting to that level at that point, just making small tweaks.
Serban is very known for his vocal mixing abilities.
He should be, since, I mean, he's working in pop music. He's kind of the GOAT of that, specifically.
Or that could be its own video series entirely. It's like a whole nother skill to master.
I mean, as a mixing engineer, that's one of the things that should be pretty bread and butter for you. You should be really good at that, no matter what your genre is. But of course, it's kind of a different bag for different genres, honestly. Like, trying to squeeze a clean vocal into an EDM or a rock mix is very different than trying to get like a beautifully just soaring Adele type vocal on just a more minimal production that only has drums some bass guitar or something, you know what I mean?
Your master chain is not gonna solve your vocals for you. Like, you need to know how to treat vocals well. But with this as well, like, the fact is that a lot of the vocals that he gets sent are already really, really good. John shows an example of one of the Bruno Mars vocals from the session, just showing like what's on the channel. And it wasn't a lot. It was like, he was saying like, wow, this is like, it's already great, you know? So just knowing what to do, what not to do. But I'm sure they have like rare instances of just getting hot garbage through the mail too, for whatever reason. I would absolutely love to hear those before and afters. Like that's like what I really want to hear. Here's John talking about getting like more poorly recorded, quote unquote, bad mixes or whatever.
I actually talk about this with some friends of mine. It's not that easy to sort of know the true level of a mixing engineer unless you really do get to hear those before and afters. Because if you're just hearing the outcome and you don't know how it came in delivered, you just don't really know what happened. Like, the production could have already been like perfect. So then it's like, well, who's the mixing credit go to in that scenario, you know? It goes to the mixing engineer. But the producer could have been like going absolutely crazy and ham and just didn't take, you know, not really getting the credit for that kind of sometimes. And I don't know. It can also be the case where like a mixing engineer's career can kind of just really take off because something like that. I don't know, like, you know? It's just an interesting thing.
There's actually this like YouTube channel on like metal mixing where people have gotten like a bunch of the best mixing engineers in metal to mix the same exact track. And they basically gave all of them and everybody, and anybody can now have access to them, like the multi-tracks to one song. And then they just had all these like really good mixing engineers mix that same song. And so you could hear the difference between all the different mixing engineers. And you could yourself try mixing it then. And that's really cool. It's really awesome. Like, I would love for there to be some sort of like mix off between like all the best pop mixing engineers in the world. That would be sick. That would actually be really cool. That would really like put some feet into the fire type of thing, you know what I mean?
Just get like Serban and Tom Norris and everybody else to just mix one track and then give everybody access to the multi-tracks so you could hear exactly who did what. I don't know. And just like have it be kind of like, I don't know, not super good. Like, it would be cool if the track was like kind of funky, like wonky. So they really did have to work and it wasn't just a complete layup, you know what I mean? I think that would be really cool to see because it also like might reveal some really low-key, super talented, unknown mixing engineers out there who just destroy everybody else, you know what I mean? That would be sick. I guess you'd have to like throw down some serious cash and get everybody involved. Like, would you have to pay Serban $10K to do that? You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I would like to think that people would do that semi out of the kindness of their heart, just as a scientific experiment. Here's a reminder of a fact. I think this is just an objective truth. If you gave every single mixing engineer on the planet the same master chain, even if it was like a pretty intense, I mean, I guess if you really just absolutely demolished the master, like you could really kind of force everybody into a certain type of sound, and because it would be really difficult to fight against that. But let's just say you took like a general one like this. If Serban just like gave everybody the master chain, and then you had every single mixing engineer on the planet mix with that chain, and everybody mixed the same track, every single mix would sound different. I'm sure there would be some that would be pretty close, but they would all be different. And Serban would still sound like Serban. And I still wouldn't sound like Serban. And neither would you, probably.
I mean, yeah, that's just how it is. Because it's not about the tools. It's never been about the tools. It's about how you use them. All right, so there you have it. That's my personal 2 cents on this whole master bus conversation. I could talk about this for literally hours, as you can probably tell.
Oh, there's literally like a million other things to talk about in terms of like just master channels.
For example, loudness. Like, that's a whole... Feel free to go check out that CSV file. You know, go to town, do your own research. I honestly don't know why it's so fun to think about this stuff. I don't know. I'm just like kind of sick or something. It's weird. It's like a weird obsession. I know they're the guys who, you know, there's some of you out there who know what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, I know you know. I get some like weird satisfaction thinking about it. I don't know. There's probably something seriously wrong with me.
All right, that's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. Thanks for listening. Oh wow, I didn't realize how dark it got. I've been out here for a while. By the way, say hi to Bob. That's what I think about your mixes.